Okay? Hello. Once again, we are dealing with the pre-concert, the inter-COVID pre-concert talk with nobody, but this is really pre-concert because it's actually the day before. We have a concert coming up that is 3 pieces that are generally not very well known. And this, one of the things that we run into all the time with going to concerts of pieces that we don't know is that we have to make decisions about what it is we want to do, what it is we want to see, what it is we expect to see. And the end result is, very often, we rely on a collection of expectations. And what we do is we hear things from people, we put together things that we think are intelligent ideas, and we put a box around this stuff, and we think, therefore, the box is proof that we know what we're talking about, that we know what we're going to look at, and we can make a decision, no, I don't want to go to this. I don't want to go to this. And it's strictly based upon the collection of information that we have built into this box. Voila! A box of high expectations. This box here, for instance, the first piece, ta-da, my expectations, is Igor Stravinsky. Igor Stravinsky's Pulchinella. The trick with this is, very often, when people look at Stravinsky, the first thing they say is, I don't like Stravinsky. And you wonder, of course, why can you say that? How do you say that? What's the problem with Stravinsky? But people will they will have a list of criteria. And to give you an idea of this, for me, my first Stravinsky experience was back in 1966. Y'all remember that, don't you? CBS did this special about Stravinsky, and it was all the rage. It got lots of advertising and all this stuff, and so I asked my mother, well, what's up with all this Stravinsky? Is he really any good? And not to disparage my mother, God forbid, but she said, I don't really like him. His music's too weird. That gave me the opportunity to say, Stravinsky, he's too weird. I don't need to go there. And so I didn't watch the program, okay? Now, eventually, I did actually hear, anybody who has seen Disney's Fantasia will realize, of course, that when the dinosaurs get wiped out, they get wiped out to the sound of the Rite of Spring. And that was very powerful and very exciting, very driven. It's also very much like movie music, so it was the cartoon was a distraction from it all. But the idea of Rite of Spring actually was put in my head way back then, and with all the doom 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 doom, and so that was that. Then I got into college. And when I was in college, I asked the question, because you always want to ask about what it is your teachers like so that you can get a good grade because you would agree with your teachers. And I asked about the significance of Stravinsky. And they said, compared to Bartók or to Schoenberg, Stravinsky is really, he's got a good press agent, but he's not really that important musically. And of course I believed them. Schoenberg created the 12-tone system, and and people would say, and I would ask, well, did Stravinsky ever use 12-tone? And yeah, he did it, but in a very rudimentary fashion. So they were always downplaying the significance of Stravinsky. And I was buying it, okay? Then eventually, I was doing a performance with the Nashville Symphony Orchestra doing the Bruckner Te Deum, and another piece on that program was the Suite from the Firebird. I had never heard this before, and all of a sudden, here was this magnificent music, this beautiful, beautifully powerful, overwhelming music, and I couldn't believe it. And then I remembered having heard people talking about Stravinsky as being the savior of music for the 20th century. And I thought, yes! They heard the Firebird and they said, yes! But then they heard the Rite of Spring and they said, no! And so, in my mind, I thought, oh, the Firebird was written early. And the Rite of Spring was written much later. And so that was his developing, his growth as a composer and his musical styles. Come to find out, Firebird and Rite of Spring were written in the same year. They were written right at the same time. The two musical ideas that were totally, totally different. So, I was confused, but I didn't pursue it any farther because we still don't worry about Stravinsky. Then my wife was involved in a performance of the suite from Pulchinella, which you will be hearing later, the first thing on the program. And so I really wasn't interested in hearing some Stravinsky because, hey, it's Stravinsky. Nobody worries about Stravinsky, right? And I know all about Stravinsky because I know Firebird and I know Rite of Spring. And all of a sudden, the concert started and I'm hearing this sweet, sweet, charming, charming music. And I suddenly realized, this is Stravinsky? This was just, it boggled my mind. So I did some investigating. Pulcinella, this is a stock Commedia dell'arte character. The Italian Commedia dell'arte, you had these characters and you would create this play around them, and you would create a scenario and then let people make stuff up as it went around. And it could be very, very exciting, it could be very dramatic, it could be very funny. Usually it was very funny. Oftentimes it was kind of rude. But even things like I Pagliacci is based upon Commedia dell'arte. And so this suddenly, and this was put together supposedly with melodies. Diaghilev wanted to put this together, and he said the composer Pergolesi wrote these wonderful melodies, and I want to use them to do this. And you can put together this music based upon these Pergolesi melodies. Turns out they're not all Pergolesi melodies. Some of them are, but so many of them are something else. But the fact of the matter is, it doesn't matter. This is a very charming, very witty piece, very beautiful, very, oh, God, I can't say enough about it. The way that he writes the chords around the melody that creates the spacing, it's just a remarkable piece. This is, Italian melodies are this way, charming, and they don't waste time developing it over and over. They have the melody, do it again, maybe a third time, and then they write a different melody. So the thing that I came away with all of this, over my years of experience putting important stuff into this box, is that Stravinsky wrote the Rite of Spring once. He never wrote it again. If you are thinking that Stravinsky sounds like the Rite of Spring, you would be sadly mistaken. because Stravinsky sounds like any number of things, depending upon how he felt at the time. And the end result is you can't base your love or hate of Stravinsky based upon simply one piece. Like there are going to be other pieces that are like this. So this is what's so cool about this, to realize, yes, I can go to hear this piece because I don't know anything about it. I think it'll be great. Now, once again, looking into the box of all of these very important collections of things is Rickard Strauss. The second piece on this program is the first horn concerto by Rickard Strauss. What do I know about Rickard Strauss? I know that he wrote very, very beautiful music, wrote very, very, like the four last songs, or even like Der Rosenkavalier. He also, just when I accepted that and thought, well, you know, I like Mahler better anyhow at the time, then I discovered Salome. Particularly Salome. There are other people who swear by Elektra, but both of them are sort of Wagner on steroids. They're wild pieces, overwhelming pieces, and I thought, that's where Rickard Strauss was going. He was building this super Wagnerian approach to music, and so then I would ask people, well, what other great things did he do? And the fact of the matter is, after Elektra, he pulled away. He pulled back. Because, to a certain extent, people told me that Rickard Strauss believed that he was the reincarnation of Mozart, and which, curiously, makes me think, well, what do you expect? I mean, Der Rosenkavalier, they wear Mozartian costumes. Lots of Straussian operas have Mozartian costumes. And so I thought, that's what's going on. Okay, but it seemed to me kind of odd that he would challenge, he would push the limits and then say, no, enough of that. I want to write beautiful music again. And so that's what he did. The trick, of course, with Rickard Strauss is not only did he write beautiful music, but also powerful music, and not only did lots of people like what he was writing, but also the Nazis liked what he was writing, and they realized that it would be to their best interest to have Rickard Strauss writing music for them as well. And the end result is that kind of besmirched his character, if you will. It sort of messed with his approach and with the way the people looked at him later, particularly after the war. But having said that, we have then, finally, we also have 2001, A Space Odyssey. And that opening bit of the sunrise, and it's like, oh, man. And that's when I discovered the tone poems and the idea that Also sprach Zarathustra, that starts out with this magnificent sunrise. In the movie, that's all you get. And that is this sort of Wagnerian happening, this sunrise, Wagnerian sunrise, ta-da! If you listen farther, after that's over, suddenly it's Mozartian strings. Suddenly it is this gorgeous stuff. It is really very, very interesting, this dichotomy that he sort of plays with. And so this is where I came. This is where, when I think of Rickard Strauss, this is what I think of. Suddenly, we are going to hear Rickard Strauss's horn concerto, first horn concerto. And this is totally different. Rickard Strauss's horn concerto was written when he was 18 years old. It was written for his father, because his father was a French horn player. He listened to this. It is so wrapped up in form. A concerto is in 3 movements: fast, slow, fast. The first movement is in sonata form. The second movement is soft and elegiac and kind of almost a how do you say? Almost a theme and variations kind of thing. And then the last movement, curiously, is a rondo. A rondo. And this was something that Haydn, a lot of Haydn symphonies end with a rondo. And rondo is A-B-A-C-A-D-A, like abracadabra. So suddenly you realize this was written before the Rickard Strauss that was in my box of great and important things about Rickard Strauss. This was written before that. This was written at a time when what Strauss was dealing with was classical forms, and to a certain extent like Mendelssohn. And so, and this piece has a very Mendelssohn-like sound to it. Doesn't really sound anything like later Strauss. Curiously enough, the next piece he writes is Don Juan, literally like 7 or 8 years later, a totally different composer by that point. But nothing of what you know about Rickard Strauss happens in this piece. This is a very sweet, charming, almost innocent piece. So finally, the last bit we have in the box of expectations. And this is a piece by Franz Joseph Haydn. This is his last symphony, Symphony number 140. This is, Beethoven wrote 9 symphonies, so Beethoven 9, and Mozart wrote 41 symphonies, and so the last concert that you did that was here was Mozart's 40th symphony. And so, but when you talk about Franz Joseph Haydn and his 104 symphonies, Haydn, this is an interesting piece. This is a great piece. This is a wonderful piece. It's a solid piece. Haydn wrote. He was born in 1732. By 1750, he was working as a freelance musician, and then in 1761, he was hired to write music for Prince Nicholas of Esterhazy, and he became he was the court composer. He did all sorts of stuff. He described himself as being a slave for Esterhazy because he had to do everything, all the music that happened, he had to put it together. He had been used to, when he was hired though, he was very excited because he got to work with the Esterhazy Orchestra, which was, curiously, an orchestra that made up of 15 members. Very good players, but 15 members nonetheless. He decided maybe if he pushed things a little bit, he got it up to 30 members. This made for a different sound. Early Haydn symphonies have a very sweet, very charming, very innocent approach, and that in part because that's the sound that his orchestra would make. The larger orchestra gave him more opportunities to make noises and stuff like this, but it's an elegant style. He was considered the father of the symphony because it was really under him that the symphony became a 4-movement thing, and it was divided. First movement fast, second movement slow, third movement was a minuet, followed by a very fast rondo. And this was like always the case. And by 1791, Nicholas died. And when he died, his opportunity to do music also disappeared because his son wasn't interested in music. His son said, yeah, you can go and arrange to do concerts and stuff, out of town and that sort of thing. Just make sure that everybody knows that you work for me. So he was getting the credit for this, and then that was fine. What he did though was it was arranged for him to go to London, and when he went to London, suddenly he was shiny new toy. He was everybody. Just really, they ate him up with spoons, and because his music had taken on a character that was stronger than the music that other people were doing at the time. One of the biggest composers in England at the time was Johann Christian Bach, one of Bach's many sons, and he wrote lots of symphonies and stuff. And they are very charming. They're very elegant and very sweet, and not very powerful necessarily. And Haydn played with this sense of power. And one of the things that ultimately got him to London was that he got to have a larger orchestra still, an orchestra of 60 members. So by the time he got to Symphony number 104, this is a huge orchestra for him and for anybody. This is big noise. This was big noise. And it is curious. This is after Mozart died in 1791. He wrote his last 3 symphonies the 2 years previous. And here's Haydn, and suddenly it's not comparable. It's different stuff. Haydn is different from Mozart, and we don't necessarily know this. The other thing, too, people will say, well, how does Haydn compare with Beethoven? The only major work that Beethoven had written, what he wrote at the same time as Haydn's last symphony. When Haydn wrote his last symphony in 1795, Beethoven was writing his second piano concerto, which, just between you and me, was his first one. His first piano concerto was actually written 5 years later. But he didn't write any symphonies at this time, so Haydn had the park to himself. He was having a party and he was doing stuff, and it was great stuff, and people were eating it up with spoons. And so this, what do you get with Haydn? You expect Haydn to be charming, elegant, refined, kind of sophisticated, kind of enlightened, and you don't expect him to express sort of a storminess, the intensity, the drive that you would expect from a romantic composer. But Haydn does this within the framework of the classical symphony, the classical period symphony of like 1750 to 1800. This is a wonderful thing. This is a charming thing. This is a really wonderful piece of music, and it isn't just the light, easy stuff that you can just toss off without a rehearsal, because it's significant music. And so this is the thing that I wanted to express to you. 3 pieces of music: Pulcinella by Stravinsky, the first horn concerto by Rickard Strauss, and the last symphony by Franz Joseph Haydn. We have 3 pieces, none of which actually carry the, how do you say? They don't fit the mold. They don't, what we expect from these composers is not what you get here. These are interesting pieces. These are, and this is the sort of thing, this is what's so great about going to a concert like this, is because you get to hear something that you very likely have not heard. And this is very, very wonderful stuff. So I hope you enjoy it. I hope you find it fulfilling. It's beautiful, beautiful music, and it is not, it so very really does not fulfill your expectations, because it doesn't go there. It doesn't try to fulfill your expectations, because it just is, it's composers being free to be who they are, to do what they do, to love what they're doing, and so here we are. Thank you very much. I hope you enjoy this. Do take care.